So before we get started with today's video, I do want to kind of let you guys know that last night I come up with a little plan for this month in terms of the Tempest Cup. I want to change a little bit of how I cover PvP content, and I'm going to ask you guys for some input and some feedback on these new style videos. First thing that I want to do is, of course, every month I want to do what team do I choose. Those videos have always gained a lot of interest, and I always get a lot of people commenting and discussing different types of Pokemon that could possibly be good in the current month's meta. But specifically, I want to start working on a deep dive series where I take specific Pokemon and I do a deep dive on what role they play on a team, how good they are, what their strengths, what their weaknesses are, stuff like that inside of the cup. And I mean, of course, I can basically rattle off like every top tier pick that comes across PvP Poke or Pokebattler or anything like that, but more specifically I wanted to catch your guys' input and see what you guys want me to look into, because there's Pokemon that don't show up on the top meta lists that are very much considered anti-meta that very well have a spot in the meta. They just usually get overlooked. A good example would be like Mr. Mime last month in the Twilight Cup, because I don't feel like a lot of people were talking about it. It kind of flew under the radar just a little bit more than, I mean, I'm literally looking at this stuff almost every day and I completely overlooked it. So I want to kind of take your guys' idea of what you are thinking about running, and I'll do a deep dive on it, and I plan to do several of those videos throughout the week to try to see like how good is this Pokemon in this cup. So yeah, if you guys have any kind of suggestions on where we should start, what Pokemon you want me to look into first, please let me know down in the description below, and let's get on with the video today. Grandma! Grandma! Have you seen my glasses? Grandma! Where's my glasses? Oh, never mind. I found them. Roll the intro. Hey, welcome. This is weird. I didn't plan this out before I did this. Welcome to another episode of Pokemon Go, something that I'm going to call Pokemon Go Masterclass. Oh, hey, I didn't see you guys there. While that dries, today we're actually going to be talking about the Tempest Cup, Tempest League. I never know which one to say. Over the last 2 weeks, I believe, I have been doing as much research as I can on the Tempest Cup and what I deem as a good team for this cup. Let me just go ahead and start by saying that, unfortunately, I don't have a definite answer. And there's a couple of reasons why. So one is this meta is even less of a clear-cut meta than the last 2 months have been. It seems like the typings and everything that the Sylph Arena is putting into these cups is getting better and better and better. So I do have a few ideas of some teams that I want to communicate to you guys and kind of show you guys how maybe you should go about building your team, because there are a few key points that you guys should probably know whenever you go to build your own team. So there are a few Pokemon that really, on paper, they sound like the best options to have in the league. On paper, they are amazing. This is still yet to be seen in practice, but let's go over them really fast. Let's move you guys up a little closer here so you can see what I'm writing on the board. So, in terms of these top tier Pokemon just on paper, Lapras, Abomasnow, and Skarmory seem to have the highest, like, core moveset. They have the best typing, they have the best coverage, all those types of things. These three rank really, really, really high. Magneton, Tropius, and Alolan Sandslash also bring up, basically they're in a similar league as these three, but they just quite don't have the stats and the matchups to really be on the level of these three. So, why are these 6 Pokemon really, really high on this list? Lapras has an insane amount of bulk. It's just so bulky that it's going to be able to have a huge TDO. As long as you don't get like super effective damage done to you, you're going to be able to last for almost forever, it seems like. And it just puts Lapras in a really, really good position. Abomasnow is in a similar category where it has some bulk, but it really has one of the best moves that's going to be appearing in this league, which is called Razor Leaf. Razor Leaf has an absurd amount of damage and an absurd amount of energy gain every turn. Abomasnow actually has access to Blizzard, Outrage, and Energy Ball, as well as Razor Leaf and Powder Snow, which Razor Leaf is going to be doing an insane amount of damage, plus an insane amount of energy gain for Abomasnow, so he's going to be able to fire off either Ice moves, Grass moves, or he'll be able to fire off neutral moves in most situations with Dragon. With Outrage, that's going to be such a huge, huge advantage for Abomasnow there. Next we have Skarmory, which Skarmory is kind of like the... Skarmory was huge in the Boulder Cup, and I think he's going to make a pretty solid return here this month. With his insane amount of resistances, he's going to be able to pretty much hold his own against almost everything. So he does have a weakness to fire and to electric, which both of those are going to make an appearance this month. Steel Wing's going to be able to do super effective damage against all of the ice types that are out there. Sky Attack's going to be able to push mostly neutral damage to everything that ends up showing up. So I think Skarmory is a very solid choice. Magneton almost falls into the same category as Skarmory, but Magneton actually has this weird situation where he actually counters Skarmory while also doing some of Skarmory's job. So Magneton actually has access to Steel-type moves, plus it has access to Electric-type moves, which means that you could put yourself in a situation to actually counter Skarmory and do Skarmory's job at the same time, which I personally think that is just, it's amazing. I love the fact that you can do both things on one Pokemon. Next we have Tropius. So Tropius is in a weird situation where Tropius is a regional, and not a lot of people are going to have access to him. I personally don't, so I won't unfortunately be able to do any testing with him, but Tropius is a monster. He has already been showing really good strides in PvP. He has access to Razor Leaf, he has access to Leaf Blade, he also has access to Aerial Ace and Air Slash. The fact that Tropius is a regional is really going to hinder his usage in this cup if you don't have him, but for the people that do have him and have one under 1500, Tropius is going to be a very, very strong Pokemon. Last, we have Alolan Sandslash. So Alolan Sandslash is in this great position where he has Ice and Steel typing. He does become 4 times weak to Fire, but he ends up having a really solid set of moves. I personally am really leaning towards putting an Alolan Sandslash on my team. I have one that's decently powered up. I haven't bought like any second moves or anything on it, but it's such a good just package all in one. He is kind of slow, which we'll get to here in a minute, but he does have a great little set of moves and everything that go along with him to really set him up for some good success. What's actually going to be good against these Pokemon if they're all, you know, top tier echelon on paper? What's going to be good against these? I really hate that this light just completely destroys this board. I wish I could wait to find a tilt the board just like a couple of inches. Anyways, okay, so I've written down 6 not so top tier, not so like amazing on paper, but when you consider matchups, these Pokemon really, really do shine here. So, a couple of reasons is Abomasnow is going to be quad weak to fire. Alolan Sandslash is going to be quad weak to fire. So what's the first thing that you think of? Okay, well, I need a good fire type Pokemon. Charizard ends up being a Pokemon that is just amazingly good if it has Ember and... Charizard having Fire Spin and Blast Burn really do set it up to be a good contender up against Abomasnow for the quad weak to fire there, and the Alolan Sandslash for the quad weakness to fire. And actually, it also does pretty good against Skarmory, considering Skarmory does have a weakness to fire as well. Lantern. I chose Lantern as a good counter to Lapras because Lantern is going to be a water type and electric type to itself. It does have quite a bit of bulk for being a water electric type, and Lapras is actually going to take super effective damage from the electric typing. So Lantern actually ends up being a fairly good counter, in my opinion, to Lapras. Lantern actually also does pretty well against Skarmory, considering that Skarmory is not going to be able to hit it for very much super effective damage. I don't think it should have anything against Lantern there. Skarmory is going to be weak to electric as is, so Lantern ends up being a pretty good option going up against anything that's going to be weak to either electric or water. Next we actually have Steelix. So Steelix is in a good position yet again this month in terms of like where he was in the Boulder Cup. He does really good against anything that's ice as is, so Abomasnow is going to end up being pretty hurt by Steelix. But the main thing is that Steelix can actually beat Skarmory in certain scenarios. So Steelix actually comes out pretty good in this scenario. I imagine that Steelix could also beat Magneton, but I haven't done too much research into that. Considering that Magneton shouldn't hit Steelix for anything super effective, and Steelix should have a way to do neutral damage to Magneton, I should think that it would be able to win that matchup in certain scenarios. Really fast, I forgot to mention that Charizard actually will do good against Tropius as well, considering that Tropius is a grass type. Charizard's gonna be a-okay for that one. Altaria is actually going to be a really interesting Pokemon because we've seen how good Altaria can be in the Great League with it maxing right under 1500. It does a really good job at what it does. Having flying type moves, having dragon type moves, it really sets it up to just be a really solid Pokemon. I think Altaria will be a threat that people will bring Pokemon to counter Altaria. So it could be so good that you have to bring counters for it, similar to how Toxicroak was. But honestly, actually it'd be more like the Medicham. Because of how good Medicham is in the league, people are going to bring counters for Medicham as it already is. So Altaria here, it's just going to be strong against most matchups. Lapras, it's going to kind of hurt in. Abomasnow is going to kind of hurt in. Skarmory, it's going to do okay. It shouldn't have too much of a trouble. I haven't ran any sims on that, but it should be okay against Skarmory. Magneton, it may have a little trouble. Tropius, it shouldn't have any trouble. And Alolan Sandslash, just because of the ice moves, it should have some trouble there. In general, Altaria is just a great Pokemon because of how well it can actually flex its stat. Next, we have Alolan Graveler, which Alolan Graveler is he's so cool that he's actually being talked about in this league. So Alolan Graveler being rock and electric really sets him up to have an interesting matchup in most things here. So Alolan Graveler is going to be in an interesting spot here, only because Alolan Graveler is actually going to be weak to grass and ground and water. He's actually going to be in a sticky situation. But what actually sets him up to be really good is that going up against Skarmory, he's going to have one of the actual better matchups here. He's going to quad resist the flying type damage, and he's going to be able to do electric damage, which will actually be super effective against Skarmory. So keep that in mind, that Alolan Graveler could end up doing pretty well against Skarmory, and also considering that steel type damage is only going to be neutral to him, and then Skarmory is only going to either be able to push steel type charge damage or flying type charge damage, which will, either be completely neutral or quad resisted. So definitely an interesting matchup for Alolan Graveler there. He's actually going to be pretty good against Alolan Sandslash, only because he's going to be able to push complete neutral damage to Alolan Sandslash. He actually could end up being pretty good at Magneton as well, considering that it will be mainly neutral damage or resisted damage that Magneton would be able to push. But you really don't want to use him against any kind of grass type or water type Pokemon, as he's basically going to just lose to those because of neutral damage. Especially if they're Razor Leaf, and especially if they have Surf. So, just to be aware. Next we have what we're calling the Mud Boys. That's a term that I've seen on Reddit, and I kind of like it. So, Quagsire, Marshtomp, and Whiscash here. They all serve a similar purpose, but they all are a tiny bit different in each way. Marshtomp actually has Surf, which does really good. Whiscash has Blizzard. And then Quagsire has Stone Edge. So the situation that ends up happening here is that you really have to figure out where you need more coverage on what Pokemon you're choosing here. If you need coverage against flying types, you're going to go with Quagsire. If you need coverage against ground types or and flying types, then it's probably going to be better to go with Whiscash here. So I personally think Whiscash does the most coverage, in my opinion. I personally like Whiscash, but honestly, they're going to be good for several different things here. So Tropius is going to be taken down by those. Magneton should actually be taken down by most of those. It'll be neutral to Skarmory. Abomasnow should have some trouble with them. And Lapras should not really have too much of an issue, but they're actually really good at what they do. As you can see, this meta definitely isn't like as cut and dry as some of the previous ones were, which I say that every month, but hey, it's getting even more interesting every month. So next, let's actually shift gears. I'm going to take everything that I've shown you here, and we're going to translate that into a spreadsheet that I've made that I'm going to share with you guys so that you guys can do your own little investigations here and figure out where you guys want to stand and what you guys want to run in the Tempest Cup. Alright, so this is basically my Tempest Cup spreadsheet. This is tons and tons of information, and tons of hours went into this, so I hope that it at least helps somebody out there. So let me take you through kind of like the creative process here. So you basically have every Pokemon that is allowed in the cup, whether they've been released or not released, and I'm also including everything up through Gen 4, so it doesn't include like Gen 5 or anything stupid like that, because we know we're not going to get those, but it does include things like Garchomp and things like that, just in case they end up coming out in the next month or so, so that they can at least be acknowledged here. So we actually take the Pokemon, their 2 typings, and we make sure that they're at least valid for the cup. We have all 3 of their base stats, and then we have a little CP formula here. So this is the CP formula if their IVs were all 15s. So a 100% perfect IV Charizard should be a CP of 1486 at level 18. This column here is a CP when all stats are zeroed, so a Nundo Charizard would actually be 1499 at level 21. Then we actually take the average stat product of the Pokemon. So you basically take if this column is a 40, meaning that they max out under level 40, or they max out at level 40 or below, then you're going to take the stat products and apply the CP multiplier to each of their stats to get the actual stat product. If they have 2 different levels, like Charizard here, we want to take the average between these 2, because the average encounter that you're going to have should end up being the most likely. So we take every CP from 18 to 21 into account, and we actually figure out that average stat product in between those. Then we actually have our max stat product, which is just at level 40, all three of those stats maxed out should end up equaling a stat product of this. And as you can see, this reflects, so the average stat product of a Pidgey at level 40, no matter whether you counter the Pokemon at level 40 with 0 IVs or 15 IVs, the average stat product is dependent on the level. The CP is something totally different. So your average stat product and your max stat product are actually going to be one and the same. The reason that I have that in here, we'll get to here in a minute. Next, we also have a weakness multiplier. So this weakness is actually on a hidden sheet. Let's look at type chart here. So if you look at the type chart, you actually have all of the damage that you're going to be able to do against a specific type if you are the attacker or the defender. So normal versus normal, you should be doing 1.0 damage, which is neutral damage. If you're fighting versus normal, you're going to be doing 1.6 times damage, which is super effective. We basically take whatever typings the Pokemon has between the fire and the flying, and we end up figuring out how much of a weakness that Pokemon has to those two typings. So those are just literally averaged out to the average damage that you would be taking as a defender. So that's how much weakness you have. On this sheet, basically, you just have a whole bunch of numerical values of each Pokemon that is allowed. They're all sorted by Pokedex number, so you can easily look through those. Next, we actually have our formula page. So the formula page dives a little bit deeper into each Pokemon. So let's actually look at, these are not sorted by Pokedex, by the way. So let's look at Charizard, since he was our top one there. So looking at Charizard, what we actually take into account on the formula page, we actually look at each individual attack, how much energy per turn it gains, how much damage per turn it gains, and we actually take those into account, as well as in the charge move area, we take how much they cost, and then how much damage per energy they will actually do. And those things all run into a formula similar to last month about how we used to get a damage energy score. In the terms of Charizard, you actually have him gaining 18.71 energy as an energy score, and his damage score is actually 160.58. So what that actually tells you is, on a scale of best to worst, who gains the most energy and who outputs the most damage. So if you wanted to, you could literally sort by energy here, and you can see that Torterra actually has the best energy score out of anybody on this spreadsheet. Torterra actually gains an insane amount of energy based on Razor Leaf and based on Bite. Those two moves alone, they gain so much energy. It's insane. So that definitely sets Torterra up to be a really high contender here. Now let's filter by damage, and you can also see that Torterra remains on top, but you have a different set of Pokemon. So let's look at the worst. So Torterra gains the most energy here, and Marshtomp gains the least amount of energy here. So what does that tell you? That actually tells you that Marshtomp is probably the best shield buster in this cup. Just hands down, I think he's the best shield buster, period. What that tells you is that Torterra, on the other hand, has the most energy gain, and it has a really high payoff. So let's go into the payoffs here. So the damage, in turn, you get a ton of energy gain off of Torterra, but he does a ton of damage as well. So he's definitely considered a heavy hitter. You go all the way down to the bottom, and you can see Marshtomp still remains in the same position where he's still the least damaging Pokemon out there. But what that means is that because he's also fast and does little damage, that he is a prime candidate to be a shield buster. That doesn't necessarily say that he's bad in any means. I mean, if you look at Delibird, so Delibird is in a really weird position because Ice Shard, Quick Attack, and Present are his 4 moves. But he actually gains quite a bit of energy. I mean, Ice Shard does actually decent energy gain, Quick Attack is even better, and then Present is even better than that. And then he has these really low costing charge moves like Ice Punch and Icy Wind. And I mean, they do so good that I could actually say that Delibird could do okay as a budget option. That's actually not too bad of an option there. He's a great shield buster. His single typing is ice, so he doesn't have to worry about being quad weak to anything. But I mean, I don't know. It's Delibird, man. Then let's move on to the effectiveness score. So the effectiveness score is literally just the same as this weakness here. It just kind of tells you how good they're actually going to be. So what does that end up giving us? Here at the very end, on our last 3 columns, we actually have some interesting stats. So potential is actually going to be what I was talking about with this average stat product and max stat product. So basically the max stat product is how good that Pokemon could be at level 40 with 15 IVs. For instance, let's keep looking at Charizard here. Where's our Charizard go? So Charizard has a potential of 29.43%. Why does that even closely matter in something like the Tempest Cup? So let's take a look at Celio and Dugong. So I think these 2 Pokemon are going to play very similar roles as what they're actually good at. They both are going to use mainly ice and water type moves. Both of them do have... No. Celio does end up having a neutral move with Body Slam, but Dugong actually has a steel type move with Iron Tail, so let's take those 2 in consideration. So Celio is going to have a huge potential... Celio is going to have a huge potential advantage against Dugong, as it's going to be able to flex its stats a lot more. But Dugong ends up having a higher energy times damage times effectiveness score. So you end up having this scenario where Celio is actually going to be more effective per energy that it uses, because if you look here in this last column, damage divided by energy, he gets a score of 7.41. So that means that Celio is going to get more bang for your buck. You're going to be able to do more damage per energy that you have. But in terms of the payoff, you're not going to be able to do nearly as much damage because Dugong ends up having a higher energy times damage times effectiveness. So what that ends up meaning is that depending on what you need, both of these Pokemon play a very similar role, but which one is going to be better for your scenario? Celio is going to be better for damage versus energy. It's going to be very good at doing the damage per energy that it gains. Dugong is going to have a way higher damage output than Celio though. So it sounds to me like Celio would be a better shield buster, Dugong would be a better heavy hitter, so in turn, whichever role you need filled, that's whichever one you choose. So that's kind of how the spreadsheet is working at the moment. I probably will go back and make like weird little changes here and there, but let's take a quick look at these top Pokemon that I have here. So Groudon, not going to be able to make it. If we look, actually, you can tell Groudon right here, he would need to be a level 14 and have 0 IVs to even be allowed in the league. He would need to be a level 12.5 with 15 IVs to even be in the league. So even when they put him in research boxes, he's still not going to be quite low enough to make it into the Great League. He's just going to have stats that are just too high. You're going to have to be able to get him at a lower level than 14 to even allow him in the cup, which is just crazy. But for the sake of having him in here, he does actually do the most damage divided by energy. Garchomp actually is going to be really, really great. If he gets released this month, he will definitely shake up a few things here. The fact that he has Fire Blast, the fact that he has Outrage, and he has Earthquake, plus he has Dragon Tail, and he has Mudshot. I mean, he has just an amazing set of moves to work with. So I definitely think that Garchomp will shake things up if he is released in March. So we actually have the top contenders as of right now. We have Abomasnow, Torterra, Flygon, Frostlass, Weavile, and Quagsire. Those are the top 6 Pokemon when it comes to damage divided by energy. Abomasnow is going to be a great heavy hitter. Torterra is going to be a great heavy hitter. Flygon and Frostlass are both going to be great at shield busting. And then Weavile and Quagsire, I mean, they're also really good at just kind of being mids. And you can kind of see that it kind of shows you what role they're going to be at the very side here. So the higher the number, the harder the hitter they are. The lower the number, the more of a shield buster they are. And you can see based on these top 6 here that Abomasnow and Torterra would be your heavy hitters, your Flygon and Frostlass would be your shield busters, and then your mids would actually be Weavile and Quagsire. I am not saying by any means that this should be your top 6, but in my formula, in my testing of this spreadsheet, they do perform the best. That doesn't take into consideration everything. Of course, all of this video is on paper. I'd love to discuss everything that we've talked about today. If you guys have any comments, any questions, or any suggestions for the spreadsheet, please let me know. So, what team do I pick for the Tempest Cup? It's really hard. It's a really hard situation here. I personally think that I would pick something off of the board that I wrote earlier. Out of those 12 Pokemon, I think I would mix and match those, something to make up 6 of those. But hey, I need to know what you guys have cooked up for the Tempest Cup. Let me know. If you like to like videos, make sure you do that. If you don't, you can be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you've got down in the comments below. And until tomorrow, I will catch you guys then. Please make sure that you respond with Pokemon you'd like to see a deep dive on.